Okay, good morning, everybody. Today's my class on introduction to the concept of bills of rights. Concept of bill of rights. Under this topic, I will teach you human rights characteristics, international bill of rights, who is responsible for upholding human rights, human rights outlined in international bill of rights. How do rights become law? And last, definition. That means some words I will define in meaning. So, human rights characteristics, look at here. 5 important characteristics of human rights. Universal. Universal human rights belongs to all people. Inalienable. Human rights cannot be taken away. Interconnected. Human rights are dependent on one another, always link another. Indivisible. Human rights cannot be treated in isolation. That means human rights cannot be isolated from the natural person. Non-discriminatory. Human rights should be respected without prejudice. No discrimination, no bias, no biasness. That is the beautiful features of the human rights. So, International Bill of Rights. Our main core topic is International Bill of Rights. Then, what are the International Bill of Rights? Look at here. International Bill of Human Rights. That means Universal Declaration of Human Rights. International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In short, UDHR, ICSCR, and ICCPR combined called as a International Human Rights or International Bill of Human Rights, right? Okay. So more detail. International bills of rights in modern human rights era can be treated to struggle to end slavery, genocide, discriminations, government operations. So, because of these bad features of the government or rulers or state, the International Bill of Rights has emerged to react against it. Atrocities during World War II made clear that previous effect to individual rights from government violation were inadequate. Thus was born the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a part of the emergence of the United Nations. That means in the Second World War, government, state authority totally kill the humans or treated the civilian very badly, crudely. So to react to stop such activities, International Bill of Rights (UDHR) has emerged in 1948. The UDHR was the first international document that spelled out basic civil, political, economic, social, cultural rights that all human beings should enjoy. It is the main core of the UDHR. The declaration was ratified without opposition by the UN General Assembly on 10 December 1948. So from 10 December, today's we 10 December days celebrated as a Human Rights Day, right? So, when it was adopted, the UDSR was not legally binding, though it carried great moral weight. Look at here. UDSR are not legally binding. That means it is soft law. It is only declaration. But in order to give the human rights listed in UDHR the force of law, the UN drafted two treaties: the International Covenant on Civil and political rights, ICCPR, and International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. To make obligatory the provisions of international human rights, the United Nations drafted two more treaties to make binding, to make just against, to make obligatory, right? So these these three declarations falls upon the International Bill of Human Rights. The division of rights becomes these two covenant is artificial, reflecting the global ideology divide during the Cold War. In the Cold War situation, there are two type of global ideology. One, capitalist, another communist led by the USSR, and capitalist led by the USA. These two political ideology finally created the two types of covenants. Clear? Though political mm, politics prevented the creation of unified treaty, the two covenants are interconnected, and the rights contained in one covenant are necessary to fulfillment of the rights contained in other. Clear? That's why two separate covenants emerge as also in the International Bill of Human Rights. So, International Bill of Rights continue. Together, UDHR, ICCPR, ICSCR are known as the International Bill of Human Rights. Very clear? They contain comprehensive list of human rights that government must respect, protect, and fulfill. That means these three International Bill of Rights contain the numbers of human rights, and that numbers of human rights must be respected, protected, and fulfilled by government. That means state signatories parties. Human rights outlined in International Bill of Rights here means what are the rights guaranteed in the International Bill of Rights? Very simple. Right to equality and freedom from discrimination. Equality, equal treatment, and freedom from discrimination. So discrimination is still today. We are facing so many discriminatory provisions, so many discrimination on every cultural life or social life, even government officials also. So to end that type of discrimination, it is the first right guaranteed by the International Bill of Rights. Next, right to life, liberty, and personal security. To protect life, liberty, and personal security of the people. It is another rights guaranteed in Bill of Rights. Similarly, freedom from torture and degrading treatments. Freedom from torture. To give torture. Who gives the torture? State authority gives the torture. Investigation authority can give the torture. So to prevent, to stop giving the tortures, to stop to give the tortures, Bill of Rights has emerged. So another rights, right to equality before law, very crucial rights, very important rights. Another right, right to fair trial. Fair trial, criminal justice system always depend upon the fair trial. That means due process of law. That means the process of law must be fair, must be free from bias, must be free from any authority. Right to privacy, important rights. Nowadays, social media users do not respect these rights, but International Bill of Rights already guaranteed right to privacy. So another rights, freedom from belief and religion, freedom of opinion, right to expression, right to share knowledge, belongs to the freedom of opinion, right of peaceful assembly and association, political rights, right to participate in government, and similarly right to social security and right to work. These are all rights on the International Bill of Rights, and other rights also, right to an adequate standard of living, right to education, right to health, right to food and housing. These all rights fall upon the International Bill of Human Rights. Who is responsible upholding human rights? Upholding means holding the human rights. or creating the human rights or respecting the human rights. Who is responsible? First, never forget. Who is responsible? Under human rights treaties, governments have the primary responsibility for protecting and promoting human rights. Primary means first responsibilities belongs to the government. However, governments are not solely responsible for ensuring human rights. Not only government, but other authorities or institutions may also, but first is fall upon the government. Similarly, the UDHR states every individual and every organ of society shall strive teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance. UDHR says not only government is responsible, other national, international, and other measures or other mediums are also responsible according to UDHR. These provisions means that not only the government but also business, civil society, and individuals are responsible for promoting respecting of human rights. When a government ratifies human rights treaty, look at here. When a government ratifies, government signs human rights treaty, it assumes a legal obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights contained in the treaty. If any government sign any human rights treaty, that means the government is agreed to respect, protect, and fulfill that provisions of treaty. Clear? Who is responsible for upholding human rights? Continue. Look at here. Respect. Government must not deprive people of right or interfere with the persons exercising their right. Respect. Government first of all respect. How? Look at here. How? Do not, must not deprive people of right or interfere with persons exercising their rights. For example, governments can create constitutional guarantees of human rights. In our constitution, we found Part 3, 32 human rights, fundamental rights that our government respecting the human rights. Similarly, provide ways for people who have suffered human rights violation government by the government to seek legal remedies from domestic and international courts signs international human rights treaties. These three or these things fall upon the respect. Protect. Who protect? Government must prevent private actors from violating the human rights of others. That means protection also take place by the government. But how? Government must prevent to violating the human rights. For example, perpetrators mean criminal offenders, prosecute perpetrators of human rights abuses such as crimes of domestic violence, crimes of untouchability, crimes of genocide, crimes against certain class. So by guaranteeing these rights, government protect the human rights, educate people about the human rights and importance of respecting the human rights of others, cooperate with the international community as well. So this way, another government fulfill the government must take positive action to facilitate the enjoyment of basic human rights. So if government take positively, then people can enjoy numbers of basic human rights. For example, provide free, high quality public education. In secondary level, our government also provide the free education. Create a public defender system so that everyone has access to lawyer. So government makes this environment to fulfill the international human rights, right? How do rights become law? Look at here. Very simple. International human rights provide important framework guaranteeing the rights of the people, regardless where they live. International human rights law is contained in many different type of documents, including treaties, charters, conventions, covenants, and so on type of legal documents. Then the human rights treaty process usually begins with the United Nations or similar international body. First of all, the body creates a legal subject matter. Experts might first create draft of the legal treaty of the treaty. After the draft is written, the UN or other body will arrange a meeting between the representative of interested countries to negotiate the final terms contained of the treaty. This can be lengthy process if large numbers of countries were participation. That means if many countries are involved in making a treaty, then it takes so many long times. After negotiating, the countries agreed on a final text of the treaty is often for ratification by countries and that want to become parties to it. So that means after ratification of the treaties, it becomes the what? Human rights. That means after ratifications the treaties, the human rights treaty becomes the law. Countries have the different methods to acceding or ratifying treaties. That means approving the treaties. For the United States to become party to a treaty, the president must first sign it and then present it to the Senate, that means legislature parliament, where two-thirds of the senator must vote to ratify it. Our Nepal, similar process. But our Nepal, from the on behalf of state, ministers or prime minister signs the treaty, not by the president. Through the ratification, a country agrees to legally bound by the terms of the treaty. Countries have ratified treaties are allowed into the reservation to those instruments. Most of the international human rights provisions, there is provisions of reservation. Reservation is exception. Reservations are a statement made by the country that modify the legal effect of the certain provisions of the country. Right? That means certain numbers of article I will not apply. I need certain times. By saying this, make the state signatory parties reservation. Entering a reservation allows the government to agree most of the treaties while excluding or leaving parts that might be controversial or unconstitutional in our own country. If the provisions of the international treaties might be controversial or unconstitutional, then the state secretary parties make the reservation. Most of the Muslim countries make the reservation on the women's rights, right? Many countries have entered reservation to the major human rights treaties, which can limit the effectiveness of the treaties, protecting the people against the abuses committed by the government. So this is the final slide. Definition. Look at here. Declarations, a document stating standards, principles, but which is not legally binding. Look at here. Not legally obligatory. Treaties, conventions, covenants, charter, legally binding agreement between the two or more countries who signs on the treaties. Ratifications. Ratification means the formal process by which a country agrees to bound by the terms of the treaty. And last word, reservation, the exception that a state makes a treaty. Example, provisions within the treaty the government does not essay.